Okay. Okay, not too many people have heard of that term. So living benefits is basically a way that you can have a rider attached to your life insurance policy, or you can have the policy all by itself, and you'll be able to receive a portion of those benefits while you're still living. So it's a great feature that is added now just to take care of people who are in a need of financial resources, who may be going through a serious illness. And by the way, one of the leading causes of bankruptcy is someone dealing with an illness, a serious illness. So that's really important. We also have long-term care insurance. We need to start preparing for that as we get older, because we know our health starts to diminish as we get older in most cases. So why wait until later on and try to get it when you can get it at a younger age? We also have plans available for people who have high deductibles on their health insurance. So you may have a health insurance policy, you have that monthly premium to be as small as possible, so you get a large deductible to try to offset that. Well, we have a plan where you can pay out of, basically it saves the money that you're paying out of pocket. Okay, so we have a lot of different options. I'm trying to really make this abbreviated in respect for the time. But if you have any questions about anything that I'm talking about right now, or you want to reach me, you can reach me directly on my website, which is Darrell, DARRELL-Franklin.com. You can also go to Franklin Life and Annuity. You can Google that name and it'll bring up my website. Thank you for your time. Website is Darrell, DARRELL-Franklin.com.
Darrell will be doing a full 1-hour seminar next week for the Marketplace Ministry. So if you register, you can get the Zoom information and you can hear him go more in detail about his insurance business. We got slides ready. I'm going to talk to you about buying, selling, and renting real estate. Now I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version of what we have done, me and my wife have done in the last few years to help beef up our retirement. Go to the next slide, Johnny, if you don't mind. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to talk to you about financing a real estate business, purchasing a real estate business, managing it yourself, as well as should you sell or rent. Hit the next button, Johnny. And then the big question is, should I rent or should I sell? And that's usually the biggest question that a lot of us run into. In the beginning, for LD Realty, we purchased an 11-unit apartment building, borrowed $25,000 from my mom. Well, your mom must have been rich. No, my mom sat on one asset that she owned for 40 years, and that was her house. And the house was paid off. I convinced her to give me $25,000. She did. Hit the button again, Johnny. Bought the house for $119, sold it a few years later for $179 on the south side of Chicago. Hit that button again, Johnny, if you don't mind. Our current portfolio has us right at about 10 properties. Everything is self-managed, and we have an equity of roughly about $2.6 million. I said equity, not liability. Okay? That's a big difference between equity and liability. Johnny, hit that button again, sir. And this is what we have been able to do over the last few years. Hit it again. We've purchased a property, a lake house in Livingston. We weren't going there very often. We converted it to a VRBO. So what we were renting it out on a per month basis, we're now getting that rent on a weekly basis for somebody just rent it out Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Hit it again, John. We purchased these apartments in Cleveland, Texas. They stay full. We do some rental to the housing authority there. Keep hitting that button, John. This is a condo in Chicago that we purchased 2 blocks from Obama's house. So when we purchased that, we got it for a shameful number. I won't even mention to you. But because it's 2 blocks from Obama's house now, it's I'll just say it's worth 10 times what we paid for it. Hit that button again, John. I'm just showing you a few of what we have been able to amass over the last few years. This is a house, as a matter of fact, we just closed on a couple of weeks ago. Hit it again, John. You can't see the front of it, but that's the plan of it. It's one of the first houses we purchased with a pool. Go again, John, a couple of times. This is a townhouse we purchased near the Champions area, 3 bedrooms, 3 baths. And then my daughter, we were able to, and this is the good thing about it, gentlemen, we were able to share our riches with our family. My daughter, who is on housing in Iowa, was renting a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house with 3 kids. And what we did was we took our monies and bought them a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house for the same monies she was renting and paying on housing. Give the Lord a hand. Amen. Go ahead, John, to that next slide. I'm gonna talk to you really quick and then I'm gonna get out of your way, but you know who I am, so if you want to ask me questions, catch up with me after this is over. Financing your business. A lot of ways you can get money to get involved with purchasing real estate. First, ask your mama like I did. If that doesn't work, ask your daddy, but ask your friends or family. You'd be surprised how many of them uncles have been saving up money. Ask them and put together a business plan. You can't just soldier up to your uncle and say, hey, you got about 20 grand for me? No, that's not gonna work. Borrow against your current home. If you're sitting on a home that's paid for or has a lot of equity in it, if you believe in your own plan, invest in it yourself. Wow. Borrow money from your home, get a HELOC. How many of you know what a HELOC is? Home equity line of credit. Borrow against your own home or borrow from your 401k or your retirement. Some of you guys sitting on big retirements. Borrow against that to purchase your first or your second home, or you can find a hard money lender, which is the last thing on the list, which is something you do not want to do unless you really have to, because the interest from those hard money lenders could be anywhere from 10, you're right, brother, you're pointing up. You're not giving him glory. You're saying that's interest, right? From 10 to 20%. Let's go to the next slide. When you purchase your property, there's a lot of different ways you can go about purchasing your property. But what I would recommend is purchase a property in an area you don't mind going to every day, in case you have to go to it every day. Wow. Okay, well, I had an opportunity to buy 2 houses in Galveston. I said, no, because I hate going on 45 and I hate that Galveston is one way on it and one way off. Buy a property where you don't mind going to it every day. Check the foreclosure list. Catch up with a couple of realtors and tell them to put you on the foreclosure list. And look at that list often, because when you find something, you're gonna have to put a bid on it pretty quickly. Check on estate sales in your neighborhood. You know how you see those signs, estate sales? Where everybody's going to buy the stuff in the house. Rarely does somebody ask, what are you gonna do with the house when all this stuff's gone? Wow. Look at purchasing the house during an estate sale and let your friends and family know. Tell them what you're trying to do and always be ready to buy with a rainy day fund. Save your money, have some cash on the side, get that HELOC before you look for the house so that you'll have that money handy. And place your bids quickly. How many of you have tried to buy a house in the last 2 or 3 months? Okay, my hand is up. There's a bidding war out there for houses. I bid at $25,000 over what they were asking and still couldn't get it. The broker told me we had 47 offers on this house. Sorry. So if you have your money handy, and as a matter of fact, we were bidding all cash on the house, Pastor, and it still didn't get it. And sometimes you may have to buy blindly. There's been times I've seen something on paper that looked good, and I put a bid in on it. And that bid was just enough to hold that house for 3 or 4 days until I got there and was able to take a look at it. Go ahead, go to the next slide, John. Managing your property. How many of you know what FORD? I'll give you all the money in my pocket. You can tell me what FORD means. You old timers should know that. All right. Fix or repair daily. Remember that with Ford cars? We used to buy these Ford cars and they always broke down. Sometimes you want to align that with real estate as well. I don't want to be a landlord. I don't want to buy real estate. I don't want people calling me at 2 o'clock in the morning telling me their toilet is overflowing. That doesn't necessarily have to happen. Remodel for the long haul. Don't put cheap stuff in there. Our motto for LD Realty is we remodel like we will live there ourselves. Wow. And in some of our properties, we have lived there ourselves. So just keep that in mind. Instead of putting down carpet, put down a nice grade of wood. You know, and they've got some real nice vinyl now that looks like wood and it's washable. Find a competent crew and try and keep that crew busy. Purchase a home warranty. I've got a dozen home warranties on all my properties. So now if somebody called me with that toilet that's overflowing, American Home Shield, yeah, I got a toilet overflowing in Iowa. Boom, and they take care of it. Now there's a service fee called, on all these warranties, right? I build that into my lease. I let the tenant know that you're paying the first $50, $60 on anything in this house that breaks, and then I'll pay the remainder on it, typically, and they sign off on it. Jump on repairs quickly and give your tenant a break. I've got a great relationship with all my tenants. I've got one property, as a matter of fact, the one in Chicago, the tenant has been there for 20 years. You can go to the next slide, Johnny. You treat your tenants right, they'll treat you right. Sell or rent? That is the question. Should I hold on to this property or should I get rid of it? We just purchased a house 2 weeks ago. We're remodeling it now. Very, very hot market. Let me show you why I've decided to hold on to it versus selling it. How much equity is in the particular property? What will it be worth in 5 years? Well, here's an example. Let's say you bought the house for $100,000, it's worth $150,000. You remodel it for $15,000, so you spent $115,000, and there's still $35,000 of equity in that house. You rent it for 5 years at $1,000 a month, so that's $12,000 annually times 5 years, $60,000 of residual income. Okay, $1,000 extra a month. Who's getting that kind of a raise on their job? I didn't think so. You sell that house for 5 years later for $200,000 to $225,000. So the value of the house is not going to go down, it's going to keep going up. Meanwhile, you've made residual cash from renting that house out, which virtually would come out to 60 plus roughly $260,000, which that house will never sell for. Let's go to the next slide. Well, let's stay here, John. So if you want to flip it, you can. But just remember, if you flip that house, you better put some money aside for Uncle Sam, because you're going to get dinged with capital gains. My wife and I are in the process of paying off roughly about $47,000 in taxes today. It ain't a big deal. Why? Because we got the money. Okay? It ain't a problem if you got it, but if you spend everything you have, you're in for a real awakening. And if you do find somebody that wants to sell a property, try and do it FSBO. You know what that is, right? For sale by owner. Wipe out the realtor. And there's some realtors here. I am so sorry. I know y'all got a job, y'all trying to make money too, but FSBO is the best way to go because you save 6%. But every $100,000 that house costs, that's $6,000 that the realtor gets. And dedicate your business to God. He will help you run your business. Yes. I promise you. I run the marketplace ministry here, and I know the testimonies of running a business better than most. And you know why? Just like I pay Uncle Sam capital gains, I pay tithe off of my capital gains. Amen. 2 years ago, I pledged $20,000 to build this, help build our new church. And one day I walked into church and gave Pastor an extra $20,000 check. Yes, sir. Because of the capital gains that we were able to realize from our real estate. The last slide is here, and I think I'm right in about 8 minutes. Or maybe that was the last slide. So yeah, that was the last slide. I went faster than I thought. So what you want to do is really decide on, do you really want to sell or do you want to hold it? I say hold it. Hold it for as long as you can. Get that residual income on a monthly basis. Now, if you're a flipper, I'm not trying to hate on you, but if you got 40 properties that you flip, imagine the residual income you can get from those 40 properties and still sell it in a year or two. Right now, again, $2.5 million of equity. Some of those houses we did flip, and we took it and we paid off the mortgage, which is probably a big mistake on my part because it lowered my write-offs. But try and decide what, everybody has a strategy. I know several people in here are also real estate investors, but it depends on what your strategy is. If you have any other questions, feel free to hit me up and become a part of our marketplace ministry. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. First, giving honor to God, and I want to thank Pastor O for inviting me to be here today, and good to see all of you here. My name is Eric Davis, and I am a financial advisor and accredited asset management specialist with Edward Jones. And one of the things that we really focus on in our branch is we want to first educate and provide all the tools and information that people need to do one of three things. Either you're going to achieve your financial goals, you're going to plan for the unexpected, or you're going to create a lasting legacy for generations to come. And that's the thing that's really very important to me. And I know a lot of our experiences with money are come and born out of things that we dealt with in our own life. And so I grew up in a small town, Weimar, Texas, just down the road here, going towards San Antonio, and a very farming community. We didn't focus on investments. It was all about livestock and farming, and we were very rural country folk. And so we didn't talk about money very much, but saving was something that everybody knew. And my great grandmother was one of the best influences on me. And growing up, we lived with her for about 5 years. And so there was a house and about 15 acres of land at the time, which had been 40 acres before, that we lived on. And every generation that someone would pass, they might sell a little piece of that land or give a little up of their assets in order to pay off those debts. And as I was growing up and working on the land with my grandmother, that was the most important thing to her, was that land and that house. And as she got older in age, and even though she saved diligently and she lived very frugally off of her fixed income and money that she had, and she was able to lend money to others and not borrow, as she got older, her health started fading. And that was one of the things that people fail to plan for, is later in life, what happens when the unexpected happens? As I get older, am I gonna have to pay this expense or that expense? Have I planned for those things that are gonna come in the future? And have I taught my younger generations how to fend for themselves, so to speak, so that they don't have to depend on me when I'm gone? So fast forward a few years when my grandmother passed away, unfortunately, we had spent a few months and a couple of years in nursing home and months in the hospital. So a lot of the money was gone. And my parents and my grandmother had to make a difficult decision, and they sold all of that land and that house, which had been the most important thing to my great grandmother, in order to pay off all those debts. And I was a young man in my mid-20s, and that really broke me. It really hurt me. And it really began to make me think about, how is it that we can stop this from happening? What can we do to further the education that we need to plan for the future for our families? And so that's really why I got interested in investing and learning about finance. And so I just want to share a few concepts with you guys today. I know time is limited, but these are some things that we all need to focus on. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of things. First and foremost, we got to develop a strategy. And we're developing that strategy. It comes from first taking a look at, what is my financial foundation? What income do I have coming in? What are the uses for cash? Am I using it for necessary things that I'm going to spend on every day, paying my bills, groceries, living expenses? Or is it some discretionary needs? The latest fashion, taking trips, new sneakers, whatever it may be. What am I spending my money on, and how can I divert some of those spendings, those discretionary things, into savings and planning to protect for my family in the future, right? There's also short-term needs, like we all have to buy cars, we have to buy, homes, maybe there's things that we need for our family. So we also want to plan for those. So there's going to be goals that we want to develop to plan for some of those short-term needs that we have, that we can save for. Now, one of the biggest things that we need to think about is that other use of cash is for long-term investments. Now, we talk about cash and saving, but saving alone is not going to get us there. In fact, with inflation and other things that go on in the world, you're actually losing purchasing power if you're just saving. So that's why it's critically important to develop a plan, how we can invest, make sure that our money will outpace the growth rate of inflation. So think about that as a concept. First, I got to know where I'm going. I got to know where I am, first and foremost. Where am I going? And then how am I going to get there? And that's where it comes into play, how we help you to develop a strategy about how we want to get to where you want to be. You can go to the next slide. So when we talk about risk, I touched on this a little bit before. One of the things I hear from a lot of folks is, well, I don't know much about investing. So, there's a lack of education, but there's also, the market is too crazy. There's a lot of things going on in the world. It's market volatility, so I'm afraid to put my money out there. There is market risk. There's also inflation risk. And I just mentioned that, the value of money will depreciate if you don't keep pace with inflation. There's interest rate risk. There's all these political risks that you hear about out there. But I'd say that the biggest risk to all of us is not being able to achieve our goals, right? If your goal is to send your kid to college and you can't save enough money through your own savings to do that, then that's a big threat to you and your family. If you can't plan for retirement so that you don't have to go back to work later in life, then that's a big risk to you and your family. If you don't have insurance in place, as Deacon Franklin talked about earlier, and I wish we had, had a little more time to hear more from him, because I think that's the number one thing that we all should focus on. It's the easiest way to create wealth for ourselves and to make sure that we protect our loved ones is through insurance. And I'm sure we can talk about that in the future, but there's all kind of risks that we need to think about. But the biggest one is not being able to achieve what you need to do to take care of you and your family. So understand risk and don't fear it, and we can plan for ways to work around it. So next slide. So when we talk about investing, you hear people talk about diversification quite a bit. Now, really, this is just a way of talking about we want to have some balance. We want to have a good foundation, whether it's stocks, bonds, mutual funds, whether we're talking about real estate. The more asset classes that you're involved in, the less likely you are to be susceptible to some of those market risks. When one asset is doing well, the others may be lagging, but when one asset is doing bad, the others may boost it up. I use the example quite often of building a car or building a house. You're not going to want a Ferrari going 100 miles an hour down the road and not have any brakes or airbags, right? You're going to have some income generating investments. You're going to want to have some things that generate growth, but you're also going to want to have some things that provide those airbags or buffer you when the market does turn. So diversity helps us to do that, and it's important to have those different asset classes in your portfolio. Next slide. So one of the things that we hear about, I had somebody ask me this day, I was out at a community event before I came here, and first question the guy asked me was, what do you think about crypto? And everybody wants to know about the new fad, or what should I invest in? How can I make it rich quick? We focus on quality and thinking about what can you do for the long term to make sure that you protect yourself. And even if you've got a goal in mind and you've got the averages on your side to say, hey, if I'm reaching this annually to achieve my goal, I don't really care about all that noise that's going on out there, because as soon as I start to focus on the noise and focus on the things that aren't helping me to achieve my goal, that's when I can get myself into trouble. So if you stick with quality, what are the fundamentals, not the fads that are going on in the marketplace? What are the good long-term investments based on, one, the historical performance, but two, what we know about the market and where it's headed from an analytical standpoint. So that's one of the things that you'll really want to educate yourself on, is understanding the history, the dividends that companies pay, how well they perform. Maybe it's bonds, understanding credit risk and credit quality when it comes to bonds, understanding the real estate market. Before you invest, you definitely want to do your research, right? To understand what you're getting into. So focus on quality and not the fads. Next slide. I just mentioned focus on the long term. Now, I know everybody's goals are not going to be long-term goals. So I don't want to just say, hey, retirement is the number one goal for everyone. Some people say, well, I'm saving for a wedding. I'm saving for that first car. I'm saving to send my kids to college. Every one of us have different goals in mind, right? You may be saving for that first home or that real estate property that you want to buy. Define what your goal is and then focus on what it's going to take. If we focus on the long term and we think about time in the market, not timing the market. So I'm going to say that one more time. The importance is time in the market and not trying to time the market. When should I get in? When should I get out? You have to be right on both terms if you're trying to time the market. But if you focus on just saying, okay, if I can incrementally invest and figure out what is my discretionary income, if I have $50, $100, $200 a month that I can invest and I do it consistently, especially if you start at an age like this young brother here in the front, and I'm glad to see young folks, and I love talking to young people about this, starting at age 18, 19, 20, you can do a smaller amount for the next 20 or 30 years and be much farther ahead than any of us who start in our 40s or 50s, right? Time in the market. Do it today, get started with a small amount, focus on doing it consistently with discipline, and you'll be amazed at what you'll have when it's time for that goal to come to fruition. Next slide. Now, here's a big one that I talk to a lot of folks about. Everybody wants to get rich quick. Everybody wants to say, well, so-and-so told me they had a 20% return last year. Why did I have 10? Or so-and-so had 50% return. Why did I have 20? It's all about focusing on what you can control and focusing on your goals and have realistic expectations, right? If you told me that from a risk tolerance standpoint that you're conservative and we've got you in a heavy bond or fixed income portfolio, we're not going to be able to get 20, 30, 40% return because that's something that stocks and things like that would do. Vice versa, if you're in a very heavy stock focused portfolio and you do have a downturn in the market like we had with the pandemic, you're going to be susceptible to losses that others may not incur. That's again where that diversity and balance comes into play. It's making sure that we will hit the averages that you need, but not get too overweight or underweight in any one area. So we want to have some realistic expectations based on the time frame for our investments, the amount of money that you're investing, and your risk tolerance for how we structure the portfolio. So next slide. So I just mentioned maintaining balance. So here's one thing that we want to focus on. If any of you are investors out there, and if you're very heavy on stocks or very heavy on bonds one way or another, if the market does really good, one of the things you might want to talk about, like they say, buy low, sell high, is when those investments do really well or they reach that peak, we may want to carve some of that off and put it into something that's a little bit down. Now, it may sound counterintuitive to say, why would I take away from something that's doing good and put that into something that's down? It's because everything goes in cycles, right? And so we don't want to be overweight in one area and underweight in another. We want to make sure that we capture those gains and then take advantage of the downside because what? We're in the game to buy shares, right? So the more shares we could buy of something down, it's like going shopping for Black Friday. We want to buy at a discount. So we want to think about it that way and train ourselves as look at where can I find value? Where can I put my money into something that I know may be on the come up so that now the value of those shares is going to be more than what I put in the first place? Again, by staying consistent, I don't really care what the market is doing because I'm going to let the market work for me. When the market's up, I might buy less shares. When the market's down, I'm buying more shares, right? I want to focus on what's my long-term objective. How can I be disciplined in my approach and remain focused on that goal? Next slide. We already talked about this a little bit, but this is the key thing. And I actually think this should be slide number 1, is thinking about the unexpected. You know, when people come into my office, one of the first things I ask them is, do you have life insurance? Do you have an emergency savings fund? You know, we talk about 3 to 6 months worth of income as an emergency savings, and we will help you to create that through investments. But really the pandemic taught us that maybe 6 to 12 months is more appropriate. We want to make sure that if something happens that we're not planning for, that we will be able to sustain ourselves, at least pay for those necessary things so we don't have to go out and take on unnecessary debt, so that we don't have to foreclose on our home or things of that nature. So think about that when you think about anything that you want to do in the future. How can I plan for what ifs? What if I need long-term care? What if I have a medical event? What if I lose my job? You know, these are all the things that need to be a part of any good, sound financial strategy. Next slide. And I think this is another very important thing. You know, we talked about mental health. We talked about all these other things, getting involved emotionally with what's going on in the world, people letting the outside world dictate their feelings and emotions. When we're investing, we need to focus on what we can control, right? We can't control the market. We can't control what the president tweets. We can't control what's going on in another foreign nation. All of those things will dictate or impact the market and maybe our portfolio performance. What we can control is our mindset. How am I doing with being diligent, being focused, and how am I spending my money? How am I using the cash? Am I using it wisely? Am I preparing for the unexpected things? Am I sticking to a strategy? So ask ourselves those questions about what can I control? And then that's really all that we can do is focus on our strategy, focus on the things we can control, and then we can make adjustments based on anything that comes our way, okay? And next slide. And lastly, what I help a lot of clients with is reviewing that strategy regularly. So just because you start a strategy, just because you have a 401k at work or life insurance or whatever it may be, that's not really a plan. A plan is something that can be written down, it can be adjusted. So we want to make sure that we meet and we talk about things on either an annual or quarterly or whatever it may be frequency. And we're going to make those adjustments based on what the market is doing. Maybe there's a change in your life. Maybe you just had a new baby or a grandchild, or, you know, maybe unfortunately someone did pass away, or maybe there's, you know, a loss of a job. We want to be able to make the moves that we need to adjust the strategy to react and be proactive about planning for some of these what ifs and some of these changes in your life. So I think that is very critical for all of us to keep in mind. It's not a set it and forget it. It's not about, oh, I'm going to set my 401k and wait 40 years from now and great, you know, you're saving, that's one piece of it. But let's start thinking about proactively, what can we do to put together a comprehensive plan that addresses all the areas that are important to you, okay? Now, I think that's the last slide. The last one is just a recap of that. And I know I went through that very quickly, but 3 basic things of importance. 1, develop a sound financial foundation. Understand your money, what's coming in, what's going out, what are the uses of cash, how are your necessary discretionary spending, and how can you protect your assets. 2, develop a sound strategy for what you want to achieve. Be goal focused and focus on the things that you can control. And 3, we want to review that strategy and make sure that we're preparing for those things that are unexpected, and basically just keeping our eyes on what's happening around us, but being focused on our goals, right? So I thank you for your time. I know I went through that very quick. I'll be around if anyone has any questions. Look forward to talking to you.
Come on, let's give it up. Thank you. Hold on, hold on, y'all. Hey, gosh, this is awesome. All 3 of these gentlemen have presented to us just some solid nuggets on how we can really improve our financial standing and responsibility. I just wanted to see if there's anyone here that has a question that just needs to be answered, asked and answered before we move to our last segment. By the way, we do have a lunch and sponsored by Rudy's Barbecue, and so we want you to stay for that. How much money do you need to start investing?
Great question. I get that very often. I tell people, if you have $50 to start, you can find a way to get you started in something. Now, $50. And I say that, and that's not a joke. Mutual funds are one type of investment, whether it's for the education savings or whether you're investing for yourself. We can find funds. Usually some mutual funds may have a $250 minimum, but it's not about some of these companies that say, oh, you got to have $5,000, you got to have X amount to get started. There are accounts like that. But if you've got a minimum of $50, I can show you ways you can get started. Well, this is off the record, but I own Tesla myself. I happen to be a fan of Tesla. All right, so here's the official, unofficial position. So Everett Jones' official position on Bitcoin is that it's very speculative right now. So we're not openly recommending it to our clients, right? There's not enough history, not enough research, and not enough solid foundation to say, where is it going? What is it really? That's a good question. So we're not openly recommending it, although there are funds out there that own crypto and blockchain that we do have on our platform. So I have friends who do crypto. They've done very well. So I'm not saying anything negative about it. It's just not something that I'm going to recommend to my clients. So GameStop is a great example. So that's an example of how the market, volatility can happen. It just shot up based on emotional investing. So you had a group of investors basically that started piling money into it. So supply, demand, the price goes up. I mean, there's not much anything we could do about that. We're all victims of that at that point, of what's going on. You're either on board or you missed the boat. And that's what we talk about. We can only control so many factors, right? There's always going to be those things. If you time it right and get involved at the right time, great for you, right? I got involved with wrestling, WWE a while back, and it shot from $20 to $100 in share, so that was great. But those are going to be far and few between. So we're always looking for the quality things that we can depend on, things that are going to pay consistent dividends versus those kind of one-offs, right? Stockbrokers are out. Yes. That's a good question. Okay. Yeah, we're actually dually registered. So I'm an investment advisor, meaning I work as your representative, but I'm also a broker. So we actually sell you the products. So we sell stocks, bonds, mutual funds, but we're helping you with the strategy. So the big thing is we're going to partner with you. You're not going to be on your own. We're not going to just tell you what to do and you go do it. We're going to work with you to execute. Well, in so many ways. I could talk to you about how that works, but yeah, so many ways that's how it works.
Come on, let's thank the Lord for this deposit. And these gentlemen that still be around for you. And remember, we do have lunch. I want to call our last segment is dealing with social justice, and I want to thank God we have the opportunity. Thank you all.